All right, welcome viewers. This is Joanna Dos Santos, licensed professional counselor, along with my beautiful colleague Brian Mandy, who is too a licensed professional counselor. We are here doing yet another live recording, which of course will be posted in a few hours. And um, for those who are interested, for those who like to follow us, please leave us comments, please subscribe, and please also give us maybe any questions. What is it that you would like to hear? What is it that you would like for us to discuss? We are very open towards any information. This is very real with no matter what topics are going on, we are really taking our conversations to naturally flow and to discover wherever it is these conversations take us. So the purpose of these conversations, these recorded live videos, is for our viewers to tune in, to listen, to hopefully gain some insight, some information, and reach out for any questions that they might have and answers that they might need. And today's topic that we have, and it was Brian's choice of choosing the idea, is on forgiveness. And how do we forgive, or do we forgive in order to heal? Do I have that correct, Brian?
Yes, yeah. Do we need forgiveness to heal?
Mm-hmm.
And
So why don't you start us off a little bit? Mm-hmm.
I decided to pick this topic because during this COVID-19, there are lots of conversations about a whole spectrum of, psychodynamic topics. But what I've noticed with a lot of my clients in regards to to some of the relationships they've had, or the contention and the healing, or the desire for reconnection with some family members during this COVID-19 has become kind of important. It's a topic that we don't always hear about, but it is a conversation that I thought psychologically it is a popular conversation in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And forgiveness comes up so more of a byproduct of conversations in regards to anger and betrayal. So we don't really hear the word forgive. We don't always hear about apologies. But I thought that I think a consideration or contemplation about the psychology of forgiveness, or to not forgive in the essence of the protective function of holding on to a grudge. Okay? And in my thinking and reading of material, right, like forgiveness, it almost can't be a goal of therapy, because it requires it's a process. Forgiveness is really the outcome of therapy.
Do you think that we all, no matter what we're faced with, right? I mean, whether it's trauma related, situational, that in order to heal, that we have to forgive, and how long does forgiveness take?
I don't believe that forgiveness is required for healing, and I think there has to be a differentiation of the kind of trauma or injury. There is relational betrayal, and then there is physical abuse. There is terroristic injuries, right? To not forgive or holding a grudge can be intergenerational if we think about conflicts between countries. And we read about the psychology of forgiveness when it pertains to the evolution, and how forgiveness became important to the survival of the species. Forgiveness was required so that members of a community would work together. If they were fighting, a community won't be able to survive.
Right. I mean,
right? And the survival of a community is so important because they have to hold each other.
And this is such an interesting topic. And I just literally had a thought come into my mind, is we're talking about forgiveness, right? And it's almost like a daily thing because of, you mentioned COVID. We're dealing with a lot of issues realistically today, right? Whether it's the adjustments or transitioning to new roles, which we've, obviously communicated in previous recordings. But with, and this is maybe a topic for another day, but the part of racism, the part of, I don't even know what word I would have in here, because there's just so much stuff that's going on out there that we have almost an issue, whether it's forgiving, moving on, forgetting, because there's just feelings associated with this, right? Anger, frustration, you mentioned betrayal, relationships, whether it's physical or not, is sometimes clients, and I'm sure we're talking from our experiences too, is have a hard time forgiving, right? Why do I have to forgive? Forgiving means I'm forgiving them, that it's okay that it happened. Right. But realistically, it's not, right? I mean, when we get hurt.
Right. And so it's a popular belief that forgiveness is the right thing to do, or it's the wiser thing to do. There's a religious and societal kind of an obligation or pressure to be obliged, right? But you are right, because inauthentic forgiveness or superficial forgiveness is not real forgiveness, right? And so when we do it, when we feel we're obliged, or let me just do it so that we can get along, there can be repressed resentment and unfinished business.
Right, very much so.
Why then? Because it feels like a compromise of ourselves, our worthiness, our value based on the circumstances. There are everyday simplistic forgiveness, right? Because of survival of the species, a parent-child relationship. A child has to forgive an aggressive parent because at the beginning of the stage of life there's a dependence on a parent. And so forgiveness on a daily basis or issue based or circumstances allows the child to arrive at an age where where the child can individuate and then prosper, But I think parents do, when we think about adolescents especially, or what we call terrible twos or whichever stage, parents do have this sense of, I'll forgive my child because our connection is significant enough. And that's more important. And that forgiving our child allows us to continue to care for that child.
Right. So it's kind of like similar to, and I know we talked privately about this, rapture and repair, right? Is that children, we as adults, when we get upset, when we get angry, we say things, and we say things that we may not necessarily mean. I mean, I've had this with my daughter, just to bring this up. There was something that I know she did yesterday, and I cannot recall this now. She got so upset with my husband and I, and she said some things that we know they were hurtful, and by voicing it out to her, some of these words are very hurtful, but she wanted to leave. The typical, children's, if they don't get their way, they want to leave. I don't like you right now. You're so mean. And yes, we are mean. Yes, that's okay. But then the repair part of it is to be able to talk about it. So that way we can forgive them. We don't have to necessarily take everything in to be so upset about, just like with the kids, right? So I almost want to say, based on like what you're saying right now, the part of forgiveness in order to heal is it's going to sound maybe a little silly, but the small things, right? The relationship that we have with each other. Yes. To be able to voice out, what you said just hurt me, and vice versa. So it's reciprocated, right? The idea of the dialogue. And then there's the other side, right? Of how we can, maybe as adults or even kids or teenagers, how we continue to be hurt by someone else. And now, how does this impact us? And how does this shape us into adulthood, right? And how that pain then becomes quite traumatic. Do we hold on to it, right? Because then if we hold on to it, that's the repressed.
Yeah, but there's a protective function to it. Holding on to it while we're still in danger or still in an unhappy relationship functions to like, I've got to be aware of danger. Because I've got to be able to respond to it. So there is a protective function to holding on to a grudge. It gives us self-esteem. It gives us a certain sense of assertiveness. I can protect myself. I am vulnerable, but I can protect
Right.
myself at least from alertness.
Right. Do you think by not forgiving someone for, whatever it is that they have done or are doing, we behave a certain way, and that once we forgive, the part of letting go, we behave another way?
Yes, I think that the letting go, right, affect because letting go allows for other emotions to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
A sense of value, that we have wisdom within us, that we have protected, that we can be the guardian of our worth, that we can trust our instincts to help and guide us do the right things and not hurt ourselves. It is when we betray or not kind of get in tune with our intuition is when we get into trouble. And hence that's why for those clients or for those people who forgive too easily,
Mm-hmm. Right. The
they
part of forget it, right? I'm just going to
right,
forget
but
about it.
then they
Right.
never forget because it's the remembering
Yes.
that either causes us to become okay with it or not okay with it. So forgiveness is not it's not so much about forgetting, but it's about working through what we do remember.
Mm-hmm.
It is a reclaiming of ourselves, the parts of us that have been lost in that relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just to touch on what you had said. So what's the mirroring that happens with a parent-child relationship, the rupture and repair process, right? Where the
Mm-hmm.
child is throwing a tantrum and is angry, and the parent has the capacity to tolerate it. The process of apology that creates a safe space. And in Winnicott, right, Donald Winnicott, who's a psychoanalyst, came up
Mm-hmm.
with certain terms. One is called the transitional space, and the other thing is called the
Yes.
transitional experience. Transitional space is originally the parent, the mother who holds the child. There is eye contact, right? And there's mirroring. I am in tune with you.
So you mean the infant, right? I'm watching Cube.
Infant.
I'm not quite sure if our viewers are, um, but so
Oh,
what
yes.
Brian is saying is holding the baby as when they're infants,
Right,
right?
right. So the
Mm-hmm.
transitional space is essentially the holding experience,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The space is the parent, the holding experience is the transitional experience. Because I hold you, you are safe, and therefore you
Yes.
can explore and you can expand,
Yes.
right? So the same therapeutic, the same transaction between a parent-child relationship is essentially what a therapist goes through in a therapeutic space. The space becomes a safe space where clients can express themselves. And so this requires therapists to be in supervision because they are people as well. But they
Yes.
become the
Yes.
mothering, the mother therapist, rather the mother analyst. With a patient, when you get an angry patient, when they're going through anger, the phase of working through stuff with their family, they might project it onto
Yes.
us.
And we all do this. We all project,
Right?
right? We all
Right?
displace our
Right?
emotions, right?
Correct, right. So the parent's therapist then becomes the tolerating parent. And then the child client, the inner child of the client gets to express their frustration, sees that the parent therapist is able to tolerate it, and hopefully arrive at a space where they can appreciate that the
Yes.
therapist mother is not so much disagreeing, is a and or a
Mm-hmm.
parent can offer different curious perspective, but it does not mean I'm against you.
Right.
I'm
Right.
still for you.
Right. So whether it's, I
Right?
mean, obviously you cannot communicate a lot to an infant, right? Because the reasoning is not there. But as the children
Right.
grow, right, I should say probably maybe into teenage years, right, it really shapes us, them into the adulthood. Trusting relationship, I should say, right? This from
Yeah.
infancy,
Pure
that part of
attachment.
transitional
Yeah.
space is how it allows really the babies to trust who is the person that's taking care of us, because that will,
In
and
that
then
holding experience,
mhm, right,
sorry, I interrupted you.
it's
So
okay.
to a baby,
Hmm.
the holding experience is the baby's unconscious in a sense I trust that you will not drop me before I'm able to stand up for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like a parent, the child has a is able to predict a parent, you are safe, and I can practice my voice, my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
you can be mad at me, but you will not reject me. You will still hear me, and you would consider having. So the reconsideration of the relationship or the perspective or the memories, memories always distorted. But a parent's reconsideration, of course, we can reconsider the event. We can talk about it. Allows for patients then to reconsider what their history was. That
Mm-hmm.
that a resentment or a betrayal or an injury can also perhaps uh, be infused or revived with other loving interactions with their family, so that it's not all black and white.
Right.
One of
Right.
one of the issues or the product of when we don't forgive or where there is a conflict is that it causes a split, right? Good, bad, black and white
Yes.
thinking.
Yes.
In analysis, there's a concept called the achievement of ambivalence. We are being pulled by two forces, the good and bad, the devil and the angel, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right, right. It can be very confusing because they're actual forces that confuse us.
Mm-hmm.
So forgive, to not forgive, in a sense, right? The dynamic of holding on to anger, having to be aware, hypervigilant to betrayal or abuse, causes that split.
Mm.
As to think good or bad, enshrinement and bedevilment.
So I guess in other words, by
Okay,
holding
and
on
so
to,
so that's
sorry, I think it's just the connection, the way we're talking. Um, but the part of not being able to forgive is we're really holding on to anger then.
yeah. So that's why forgiveness is not always the conversation. It is about claiming yourself, your lost parts that are
Mm-hmm.
often expressed in frustration, expressed in shame. It is expressed in rage. It is expressed in
Yes.
disappointment.
Yes.
This sort of expression has a emotional protective mechanism to our self-esteem, to our survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming of self. It is a
Mm-hmm.
reclaiming of from a place of empowerment. That may not be the goal. Empowerment is not necessarily the goal, right? But
Right.
a more positive, loving self-concept.
Right. And I think what I'm thinking is to forgive is the ability to allow yourself to move on, right? To, you said split. So I'm thinking also the part of separating from this hurt or the pain, trauma, whatever it may be, whether it's you forgive or you don't forgive, or at least you understand it, where you can move forward. Right now, I have, I mean, many thoughts coming up. What, whether it's a parent child, and how do we repair the relationship, right? Versus maybe kids and their network of friendships. I mean, teenagers, what teenagers don't hurt each other, right? Because they're in such a narcissistic state. So it's all about me. Um, and I mean, this is where bullying comes in. There's just a lot of topics I think that we can take turns in here. But how can we allow ourselves to move on? Because that part of being hurt, whether it's a parent child, friendships, partners, I mean, we can go far with this. And how can we forgive? Because we're holding on to so much anger, right? Teenagers, I'm thinking kids, we can be angry for a long time if we want. And then that anger will stick with us and we're unable to move on, right? So the whole purpose of healing is to really understand ourselves, love ourselves, and maybe in some instances, maybe bring a boundary, right?
Yes.
If we're hurt by someone and whoever that someone is how long we're hurt for, understand it. Maybe it is therapy that we need to go into in order to understand it. But in order to heal, we also have to either draw a boundary to understand it. So that way we can move on. So we can be healthy, right? I mean, healthy or just being angry and suppressing it for years can also make us sick. So
yes, and there are psychosomatic manifestations for those who don't forgive, because it is the holding of stresses.
yes.
Memories bring us right back to that moment, and on a physical level, it just like, it brings
I
up
mean,
tears, it brings up anxiety.
it brings psychosomatic, right? Of how many times we hold on to something, and that something, whatever that is, it really affects our bodies.
Yes,
It
because the
really
body is a
affects our
container of
bodies.
energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's from the perspective as the from the victim, right, to grant forgiveness. But then for
Mm-hmm.
the perpetrator or defender, they too have this to seek forgiveness in essence, right? The apology is to seek forgiveness.
Yes. And
And
how,
so for the Mhm. Go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, for those, a lot of healing can come. It's been said that in order to heal, we must receive an apology. And that
Yes. How often
apology
does
has
that
to go
come up?
from intent.
That comes up
Um,
so much, right?
and it,
Because of how many, whether it's clients, individuals. I mean, let's think about ourselves, right? We longed for or wanted an apology from someone and we didn't get it. And now what? Right? The grudge that we hold,
and
the anger that, and then what? Mm-hmm.
right, right. And so, how does one work through a rupture that has no closure?
Yes.
Being able
Yes.
to receive an apology from a person who is lost or not
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
existing, but clearly a person who doesn't believe that he or she has made a mistake. And
Mm-hmm.
that right, those who do not have the capacity to apologize, there is a narcissistic, a traumatic narcissistic component to them, and there is an antisocial component to them. There is so those tendencies, right? And they have their own stuff, right? Not being able to be bound because narcissists and antisocial, right? To apologize means I am wrong, and their ego structure is so fragile that when they apologize is to admit that I am wrong and I am wrong and therefore I am bad. So they too have their own split and they can't see
Mm-hmm.
the good, they only see the bad. So to not see the bad and repression, they have to be is an entitlement. I
Right.
am
So
right.
it's like two different sides. The one who's injured, the one who is the perpetrator, right? The one who hurts. But I'm also thinking of what if I don't, what if I am the one that's hurting you, but yeah, I believe that I'm not hurting you, right? So, right. So again, this kind of go, or because you're hurting, I mean, this once again could go everywhere. I'm hurting you, you're hurting me, and then we're in this almost dance that we're hurting each
Yeah,
other, but yet nothing's going on. So now we're hurt, we're angry, we're frustrated, and the cycle still continues. And then
really,
what? Right? Mm-hmm.
because it's no
Right.
resolution,
Right. Mm-hmm.
right? So the resolution is at least from the perspective of, because we will get clients who are very angry and who are the offenders, but will not
Mm-hmm.
see their role. Like we see that in couples therapy, right? In divorces, nasty divorces,
Yeah.
dangerous
Yeah.
divorces that go on
Yeah.
and on and on. But even like
Yeah.
in parent-child relationships,
Mm-hmm.
who are like parentified children who had parents who were just not present, but also abusive. And these children, in the absence of a nurturing parent, essentially had to be their own holding uh, hands,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hold themselves and individuate so that they can then prosper.
Right. They
Uh,
can take care of themselves, right? Because realistically, going back to what you said in the beginning, whether it's this holding, the transitional, the part of trusting, at some point we also have to separate, right? So, and I'm sure there's feelings associated with this. I mean, this is where the teenagers, right? Teenagers come in because they want to individualize and they want to become their own persons,
mhm.
people. and yet parents don't want to. I mean, there's maybe not having the understanding of it, right? Because once again, I'm not going to send my child, I don't know, at 14 years old, maybe to a party at 2 o'clock in the morning. I think I also have to be realistic, like with what's right, what's not right. So that way the trust kind of continues on. So that way, and I'm sure once again, this is a stage where there's a lot of bickering going on, right? I hurt you, you hurt me, and shut the door and go away. And then 5 minutes later, can I have $5 for a slice of pizza? It exists. But
Get out of my life, but first take me to the mall.
yeah, so yes, I mean, can I go on the playground?
And I think a lot of that depends. And that goes to the I hate you, don't leave me transaction, right? The split as well.
So what would you say healing looks like? When one forgives, when one moves on, when one is able to understand, with the pain that they have suffered, what can the healing look like for them?
Yeah, there's so much to this. And part of that healing, what it looks like to them is that there is an authentic understanding of their self-concept. When vulnerability can be experienced as courage, not as weakness. The transformation essentially is a reclaiming that, and a development, right? A new reformation, a reconstruction of our identity, right? It's a reclaiming. We may not have known that we had a voice and that our opinions matter. From the perspective of Gad, who constantly doubts us, creates doubt within us, makes us question our logic, right? It flips it around, gaslight, makes us doubt, right? And therefore we doubt our capability. The healing from that, or the recovery from that, or the expansion of that is, I know this much is true about me, and what I know about me is good. I am not perfect, but I am good enough, and that the world is good enough. And that I have skills that are good enough, that I have the ability that is good enough to provide, to have a good enough relationship, to have a good enough job.
Right. So it almost sounds like we have a voice, right? So when we feel like we have dealt with it or understood the pain, to forgive is to have a voice. It almost sounds like the way you were talking. Self-esteem, right? Confidence, courage, right? Because that gives us the courage to, what? You said courage, to speak up.
Well, to look at our injuries.
Right.
Forgiving is a very vulnerable thing. Right? Oh my God, the stuff that I've gone through, they're very painful. I can't live in denial. And so it happens in drips, right? The transformation for those, what comes out on the other side when we talk about self-love, essentially is how we evaluate ourselves.
Yes.
How we assess ourselves. That our injuries, our imperfections don't define us. They're just part of us.
Yes.
That what sort of defines us are our character strengths, our healthier beliefs, our healthier values. That our values do matter. That our values can be softer and not so rigid anymore.
And it's also the parts of us that have, can we say, always been there. It's just that they have been almost hidden or so little that because of the pain, the hurt, they have been almost covered by.
We were not allowed to grow, really.
Right. So once we're able to have the voice, to speak up, to understand it, to forgive, is to allow those voices to really flourish. Right?
And
I did this just like a flower.
Those are exactly to bloom like a lotus, right? Yeah, because those parts have the potential of protecting us too. The nurturer within us, the protector, the guardian within us, the learner within us, the forgiver within us, right? So all those parts get to develop And now we don't have to depend on just one part of us, the hyper vigilant version of us.
Yes, yeah, and all of this also takes time, right?
It does take time. If
Yes.
forgiveness is rush, then it's inauthentic.
Yes.
And so as therapists, we've got to be really, really mindful about pushing forgiveness. Because there is a popular belief that forgiveness is the way to go, right? And it's not for the other person, it's for you, and it is true, but the process can be in haste.
And I think we're so, as individuals, so quick to, like we said earlier, forget about it, not a big deal. I don't want to talk about it. We all do this. I mean, so a lot of these things are very uncomfortable. Pain, suffering, hurt is very uncomfortable to talk about, right? So we don't talk about it. We think we're talking about it because it's in our minds and we're processing it the way our brain is processing it. So we're kind of suppressing it, right? But what happens is then it builds up, and then we become a certain way, right? Like you said, the anger, or we hold on to it. So to move on from it is the part of forgiving, but also letting go. And even though in the beginning, we don't want to let go, right? Because letting go means they win. It's so common, right? That we hear is if I let go, then they always win. It's not about winning. It's about for you to grow, to understand it, because you're the one that has been the victim of whatever it is that whatever the pain looked like, words, physical, whatever it may be. That you can take that, understand it, and move on. Not that who wins. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially, we don't even get to talk about forgiveness sometimes in session, because essentially the person does not see the event or the person as injured, they have released them. The experience of shame now has a new experience of pride.
Yeah.
The anxiety and psychosomatic now has physical calmness. There's clarity about how I see myself, and I don't see myself as a victim anymore.
And
I don't see myself in the experiences of.
And what's so great that I've noticed, whether it's with clients, with myself, with those around me, is that once you're able to let go, you'll see how you're able to notice of how your body responds to it, how much better you can actually feel, whether it's anxiety related or medical, right? Medical health related issues, how that really plays a part into it. We could deny it. We can not agree with it when we're in the beginning stages, but once we're able to go through that process of how many benefits can we see? Yeah. Well, yeah.
And if the process doesn't happen immediately, it's like a caged bird. You open the thing, it doesn't mean it's going to fly out immediately.
Right.
Anyways.
Well, we hope our viewers enjoyed this recorded session on can we forgive? Can we heal can we forgive in order to heal? Or should we forgive in order to heal? So I think, through the process of work, through the process of talking about it and understanding what forgiveness means, healing is possible. So for those of you who are watching this, have watched it, or continue to watch it, please leave us comments, subscribe to our channel, leave us comments, like I said earlier, questions. We welcome questions. We love questions. We are talkers, and we can continue on talking. We have to just balance our time and learn when to stop, but we can sure do this for days on end. So please leave us comments, questions, and that way we can take those into our next segments in the future. Once again, this is Joanna Dos Santos, licensed professional counselor from GDS Counseling, with Brian Nandy, who is a licensed professional counselor, a psychoanalyst from BN Counseling. So subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys next week.